Hey friends, welcome back to another Monday Musing. Today's topic is brought to us by Jake, and he asks sort of a three-part question. What are the differences between a more fluid homebrew campaign versus a module? What are the challenges and rewards for each? And how do you approach the two different types of campaigns? So I primarily prefer to run campaigns based on published adventures. I am not on the bandwagon of hate towards WotC's adventures, though I definitely recognize that many of their adventures lack some important pieces that we feel are necessary for running of our games. I am actually of the opinion that that's also the case in all third-party material as well, and that basically whenever you find that you are running a module that just happens to have everything that you as a DM needs, it's because that particular module is written by somebody who has the same sort of style that you do in terms of what material you need at the table. And 100%, if you find somebody like that and find modules that work like that for you at your table, you should double down on that nonsense and play that until the cows come home, because that is perfect. It's just going to save you so much time and effort in running your D&D game and allow you to pump your effort into other places to spice it up and make it more awesome. But I find that so far I haven't found any third-party stuff that perfectly fits me, and so when people dog on WotC versus this other thing, I get a little bit frustrated in a way, because for me they're pretty much the same deal. Like, neither of them has everything that I want, and that's just because when we're DMing, we need different material in order to be able to run our games. So that's just kind of how it goes. So I prefer a module adventure, something that allows me to have the main plot arc and story scripted out, and then following down that and taking all of the little side treks and twists and turns that my players are going to throw at me. My favorite thing is to have any sort of derailment that sends us off into some weird and random side jaunt. That's just loads of fun for me. But I do like to run campaigns that can be cobbled together from a bunch of smaller adventures, which is what Jake is referring to here. I have one campaign that is pulling from probably 4 or 5 different books, using all the different anthologies and the like to put together a somewhat cohesive campaign, and also throwing in a bunch of small homebrew adventures, some of which are not that small, to round it out and extend this into a long-term campaign with a homebrew goal. So when it comes to the differences between them in terms of the work that's required to get them to happen, I do find that there's a tremendous amount of buy-in when you're running a specific adventure module. The players know that they're running Storm King's Thunder, then they know they're going to be dealing with giants. They tend to build their characters with that in mind. You end up with a lot more characters that speak giant than you would have if you were running, say, the Rise of Tiamat. That's just a little immediate buy-in, but it's indicative of what will happen throughout the campaign, where whenever something comes up that's going to move the plot forward, your players don't need to be as enticed as they would if they had a storyline that was just running free and allowing them to go in whatever direction, because they didn't have an overarching plot. So when we've had those occasions in my, we call it DOA, Death of a Sararak campaign, where there's been no clear path forward, it requires a lot more prep on my part in order to be prepared for the many different plot hooks that I've laid out there for them to take than it would if I had a defined, this path is the way forward and here are a couple of side hooks. You can pretty much guarantee that some of those side hooks are going to entice and they're going to draw them off. The main plot hook, you don't need to sink so deep. It doesn't have to be as big a thing, because people are already bought into it. They're already enticed by it just by knowing that that's what's going to advance the plot forward. Now, it doesn't mean that you're not going to have a several-month side jaunt into somebody's story arc that takes you completely off of the main story. It just means that when you're preparing the game, you have a little bit more of an idea of where they're going to go, and side jaunts tend to telegraph themselves more than they would if you were running a campaign that doesn't have a clear direction. In terms of challenges and rewards for each of those, I think that the challenge, like I said, of running the less main plot scripted kind of adventure is that you do have to be a lot more prepared in advance for any different direction that people can go, and sometimes you're going to do a fair amount of prep work that is just going to be wasted. The temptation is to find a way to pull that in later and put it into the story, and that's definitely useful to find a way to salvage your prep work. But you just waste more prep work in a campaign that doesn't have a primary storyline. Whereas you know that if you prep along the primary storyline, that will eventually be content that gets used at the table, and all of your side jaunts are the things that you're risking, and most of the time, like I said, they're telegraphing that, so it's not as bad. So the challenge of prep going to waste is bigger in a homebrew campaign, I think, than in one that follows a plot module. I would say, though, it is probably more rewarding when you're able to create these little things that are made from scratch that people jump onto and are enticed by, go through and enjoy. The sense of accomplishment is maybe a little bit greater when it's your own creation than when it's something you've pulled out of a book. So there's definitely more of a excitement hit that this landed well when you know that it was because of you and not because of some other writer that had created it. I would say that from terms of how I approach the two different types of campaigns, I approach them relatively similarly because I've fully bought into the idea of an overarching plot. So even when I'm creating a homebrew campaign, I want to have an end goal already in mind. So that I can sell the players on the end goal, and then the journey along the way, I can seed plot elements that are going to move the story forward, as well as plot elements that are just going to be fun or interesting or grant power to the adventurers along the way. And everything at that point is just fun to go through, and I can sort of let go of the reins a little bit, and maybe that's a slight difference between that and a main storyline arc where I feel a need to provide consequences for ignoring the primary plot, so that there adds tension to it and people have more of a drive to follow that main story, while still having opportunity to pick and choose at smaller offerings on the edges. All in all, I would say that really there's not a huge difference between running an anthology cobbled together style of homebrew and running a straight module. I have run in the past completely homebrew modules where I've just come up with everything from scratch and worked at it week after week, and it's very time intensive, and that would be the major challenge of it. It is extremely rewarding when players are enjoying that and you know that the entire thing is your story, but the extra work that's involved is prodigious. Even if you aren't a big fan of WotC's published modules or any other third-party module that you might have a hold of, the fact that there is just so much effort that has been put into building it already saves you time, no matter what other elements you as a DM might happen to need in order to make that into a fully fleshed out campaign. If you're doing it from scratch, it's just so much more work. And so you get the reward of it being all you, but you have the cost of all of that extra time. And so really sometimes it's about finding a balance between that time versus reward in what kind of a campaign you're going to run. And sometimes it's just about finding a story that's just going to be super awesome and that everybody's going to have fun with. thanks very much for joining us for our Monday Musing today, and thank you, Jake, for the topic. If you have something that you would like to muse on together, then please feel free to leave it in the comments down below, and I'll add it to the list, and as we get a chance, we'll muse on things together. Thanks so much, thanks for watching, and happy adventuring.